Hi everyone, welcome to Now I See on CYC. I'm Anna Choi. Now I See is a dedicated program that opens up the lives and insights of those that have become Christian. Today our special guest is Barnaby Howarth, a resilient speaker teaching people not to underestimate the value of being a decent human being and how to turn huge crises into small disappointments. Welcome Barnaby, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks Anna, it's good to be here.
Before we get to know about how you became Christian, tell us a little bit about your life before Christ.
My life before Christ was quite interesting. I had a few challenges early on. I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was 14, and that put a question mark over my pursuit to I wanted to play AFL football, but I didn't know if diabetes meant that I'd have to wrap myself in cotton wool and stop playing at the level I'd been playing at. So, not really understanding diabetes scientifically, I thought, well, I don't know if I can actually still play AFL, but I know I can try and play AFL. So I got back into my training and worked as hard as I could, and eventually got a phone call from the Sydney Swans in 1998, asking me to come down and play a season with them. So I played with Paul Kelly, Tony Lockett, Paul Roos, guys. I had posters of them on my walls, so I was pretty stoked. And that made me realise that I could still live the life I wanted to, even with diabetes. But then, before that, I wrote my autobiography to try and tell other diabetic kids that they could still live the life they wanted to, even with diabetes. And I was one chapter away from finishing that, and I was bashed in an alcohol-fueled gang attack and had a stroke. So that was even more, there was a bigger question mark put over my life. After the stroke, I was put on life support. My parents were told they might have to switch it off. So it was in the balance big time after the stroke. But after the stroke, I decided the best way to attack life was the same as diabetes. I didn't know if I could drive a car again, didn't know if I'd ever get married, didn't know if I'd play footy again, but I thought I can go back and try at least. So did my rehab as well as I could, and eventually did all those things. I drove a car again, got married, and I played footy again. So that was all a very interesting lead up to my getting into the church and meeting my wife.
So what was your relationship with God during that time?
I essentially didn't have a relationship with God. I wasn't anti-God, but I wasn't pro-God. I knew who he was and what he did, but I had all the support I needed from my family, and I was getting by in life as well as I thought I could. As I said, I was a non-practicing Anglican. I'd been to church once on a Sunday to try and impress a girl, but it didn't work very well. So I basically didn't have a relationship and wasn't seeking one, and never thought I'd end up finding one.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Sure. As I said, I just didn't know God at all. I knew of his existence and what it was said that he had done on Earth, in the universe, but I just had no need or desire to find out what he meant to me and what I could get out of knowing God and all that stuff. So yeah, as I said, I wasn't anti or pro. I was just quite happily just going along, doing my own thing, getting the support I needed from the people in my life. So yeah, I just had no desire to jump out of my chair and go and find out.
What did you know about faith at that point in your life?
Basically, everything I knew about faith then came from my family. My mother went to Sunday school and was pretty devoutly involved when she was younger. My grandfather used to pray at the foot of his bed every night before he went to bed. I went on a Christian camp once when I was about 12 years old and drank 8 milkshakes at lunch, set a world record. But yeah, everything I knew about faith came from my family, and I didn't quite know what it meant to be faithful or to believe in God, but I could see the strength it gave to all the people around me. My grandfather was the biggest one. A lot of the person I try and be is based on my grandfather, and seeing that he got strength out of praying at the end of every night made me think there's got to be something in it. But as I said before, I just didn't have the get up and go to go and find out myself until it was thrust upon me.
So what changed all that?
The fact that I was a hopeless romantic. I was 35, I'd been through diabetes and a stroke. I thought I was doing okay, but the one thing that I was still waiting on, and which I didn't think would be coming the longer I waited, was the one, the perfect woman in my eyes. As I said, a lot of my personality is derived from my grandfather, who used to stand up when a woman walked in the room and take his hat off at the table, and
Quite traditional.
very old school.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, no, I hadn't met a girl that appreciates old school values. So I thought I was waiting for a dream that wasn't realistic. And then in 2013, a mutual friend of my wife and I set us up. And as soon as she walked into my kitchen, I thought, that's the girl I've been waiting for. She was this beautiful, angelic looking person that obviously took a lot of pride in how she looked. One of our first conversations was talking about how much her family meant to her, and all the virtues that she stood for, she practiced in real life. And I'd open doors for her and do things that I'd learned from my grandfather, and she picked them up. One time we were at a national park, we're at the Royal National Park going for a walk, and we were walking up the road, and I kept on getting on the roadside of her, because my grandfather told me that you always have to look after the girl by getting on the roadside, so if a car comes off, you can push her out of the way and save her.
That's cute.
Yeah, it was putting us at risk, but anyway, my grandfather said it was the way to go, so I thought, oh yeah, I'll do that. And I did it a few times, and she picked up on it and realised what I was doing, and was really touched by it. So when I met Angela, I honestly never thought that sort of person existed anymore. Someone who respected those old school values. So when I met Angela, I realised that we were the one for each other. So that is when my life changed. And one of the things that Angela was fairly devout on was her religion. She was a Coptic Christian, and her family were very devout as well. But one of her frustrations was that she'd strayed from the flock to a certain extent. She hadn't been to church for a while and was losing contact with the priests and her friends at church. I said, well, it's easy. Let's go back on a Sunday. So we went to church, went to St George Coptic Church in Kensington, and I immediately felt like I was somewhere that was comfortable. Angela introduced me to Father Matthew, one of the priests, and we sort of started getting along like a house on fire from day dot. And the metaphor that I always use with the church is that it feels a lot like my old amateur football club, in that playing footy was a place where I could go to and I felt comfortable. I felt like when people asked you how you were and they looked in your eyes and they actually stopped and listened and cared, I felt the same way at the church. So people didn't just go, oh, how you doing? And turn around and walk off. They actually stopped and listened and asked how you were and your family were. And so I immediately felt like it was a place I needed to spend more time at.
Coming from an Anglican background, what was your first impression of the Coptic Church besides it was comfortable? Like, it's very different from, say, even a Catholic church as well, what the Westerners are really used to.
Well, I didn't have a great recollection of what even Western church was, so I didn't really have that comparison. It took me a bit of getting used to, because I just sort of walked in and it was assumed you knew that the men are sitting on the left and the girls are sitting on the right, and you've got to take your shoes off of communion, and certain things are done in certain ways, but I had no idea what those ways were. So one day, for example, I was sitting on the left-hand side, Angela was sitting on the right-hand side with her friends, and she came and sat next to me, and I was shocked. I said, what are you doing here? Go and sit on the other side. She said, I've been going to church since I was 0 years old, so don't tell me what to do. So those I didn't have a lot of comparison with the churches, but just the getting used to factor at the Coptic Church was pretty big. But again, it was just because it was so comfortable, No one ever sort of looked down on you and got angry at you and said, oh, you're sitting on the wrong side, go and sit over there, or go and do this, put your shoes off, take your shoes off, blah, blah. There was no anger, it was all just, people would tell you that this needs to be done because of X, Y, and Z and explain it to you, and it was quite relaxed.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time today, so thank you so much for coming in. Tune in to our next episode of Now I See on CYC to hear the rest of Barnaby's incredible story.